Okay, so now we've created our requirements diagram, our block definition diagram. We're now going to create a sequence diagram. So we'll click on data, click on create diagram, and we'll click on SysML sequence diagram. You may need to click down here in order to get it to show up. So it'll show expert here, click on expert, and then it'll come up down here where it says SysML sequence diagram. So we'll select our SysML sequence diagram, and we will name it our APFT tool. So you can see our sequence diagram, SD, and our APFT tool. So the good thing about using Cameo Enterprise Architecture, some of these model-based systems engineering tools, is that we can make integrated models, and this will make your life a little bit easier when developing your sequence diagram. So now that we have our block definition diagram made, we can move pieces of our block definition diagram into our sequence diagram. So now we can show the routing of information between our blocks. So the first one I'm going to start with is our user interface. So we'll put this right here. So notice block, and it's pulling in our user interface. So this is going to be where the user will enter in information, and the system will display information to the user. And we're going to keep this somewhat simple, somewhat high level. So we'll also incorporate our data tables, and we will incorporate our lists. And we're also going to want to add one more element, which will be our user. So we'll go here to Lifeline, and you can see there's multiple options here, but we'll select Lifeline, and we will add in one element, and we'll call this the user. So whoever's going to use the tool, we also want to have a lifeline for them. And I'm not going to get into all of these different elements. Please read about them. I'm just going to show you how to use some of the basic functionality of our sequence diagram. So it's like we've discussed, the sequence diagram allows to show the passage of messages back and forth. So we'll get started by showing, what does the lists provide to the user interface, right? So the lists, we'll click here on lists, send message from list to user interface, and the list basically provides our options, male or female. So we'll just say male, female, and it also will provide, you could click here, push it over, and we'll provide age categories. Right, so essentially it's saying the list is going to provide the user interface the options, the list for sex, male or female, and the different age categories. And then the system is going to work this way. The user is going to input male, female. It's going to input age category, and it's going to input, soldier will input raw score. Right, so these are essentially the three inputs the soldiers need to put into the file, or into the system, into the tool, in order to make it work. We could get into finer detail, by separating out the raw score for push-ups, sit-ups, and run time, but we'll keep it high level and just say the user is going to input raw scores. So now the user interface takes those raw scores, then it does a lookup to the data tables. So it's going to go into the data tables with male, female, age category, and raw score. And then the data tables are going to provide the push-up score, the sit-up score, and the run score. The way I want to develop the spreadsheet is I want to have the user interface. Since these are very simple calculations, we can do the calculations on the user interface. You may want to have a separate calculation sheet separate from your user interface. It really depends on the scope of the tool you're trying to develop. So now I want the tool to determine, so it's going to be a self-calculation, right? It's going to determine whether it's a failure, and it's going to determine whether or not the soldier, or excuse me, it's going to determine the soldier's total score, and then it's going to report back to the user failure, and it's going to report back total score. And this is essentially your sequence diagram, showing the main parts of your system. It's showing the flow of data, flow of information between each, and then it's given essentially the logical flow of information through your tool, ultimately providing the user whether or not there's a failure and what the total score is. So this concludes the APFD tool SysML diagrams. We developed a requirements diagram, a block definition diagram, and a user diagram. Once you get Cameo Enterprise Architecture up and running, it's relatively simple to figure out and relatively simple to use. And again, it's an extremely powerful tool when developing your models.